Please be seated. I don't know about you, I'm still trying to get this David Bowie costume. Who picks that? That's such a curious child. It's great. It's wonderful. The title of my message this morning is Ready to See Jesus. And it's taken from the verse he was trying to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. While Jesus was passing through the ancient city of Jericho, nestled between the rugged mountains to the west and the Jordan River to the east, a solitary man was determined to see who Jesus was. Even though he was rich, he could not command the crowds to part and make way for him. Zacchaeus was a man of power, collecting taxes for the Roman emperor, but was ignored at every chance by the local population. And even though he was smart and good with figures and money, he was hated because he took money from the people to support the occupying power. And then there was the matter of his short stature. At every chance, people ignored him. Zacchaeus, however, was determined. He wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to know who he was. He wanted to catch a glimpse of real power. Zacchaeus was ready to see Jesus. By his actions, Zacchaeus gives us a picture of a person knocking on the door to the kingdom of God, determined to see what was inside. And he provides us with a vision of spiritual action, problem-solving, determination, responsiveness, and hospitality, combined with a willingness to lead a holy life. While Zacchaeus climbed his way toward the kingdom of God, there were others, people to whom God went, men and women who God approached as a powerful wave that thundered upon a rock, or a burst of wind that shook the leaves and broke boughs of the strongest trees. People like Paul, who on the Damascus road was blinded and scolded by Jesus for his persecution of the newly formed church. Or John Newton, who, while captaining a slave ship across the Atlantic Ocean, was overcome by his sinfulness, then saved by the amazing grace of God. Or the young woman from Norwich, England, when in the throes of illness, the light of God burst upon her and led her to become an anchoress in the Church of St. Julian and a great mystic. We often hear the story of God's pursuit of the lost soul. All too often, we herald the grace of God rescuing the sin-sick soul. We are right to proclaim the mighty acts of God breaking into the mundane world to grab the lost who teeter on the edge of the abyss and darkness. We are correct to teach our children these stories of salvation and delight when we hear them in church. They are sweet music to our trembling souls. And then there is Zacchaeus. He is the short, rich man who says, I belong to. He is the man who shows us a different kind of spiritual life. We need to hear his story also, because he is a man of action. He moves toward God. He overcomes obstacles to see Jesus. Like so many living in the city of Jericho, he had heard of Jesus. The stories of Jesus had traveled around the city since the time of John the Baptist, the man who washed the sins of so many in the brown, muddy, but sacred waters of the Jordan, and announced that Jesus was the anointed one of God. Even 3 years later, the people of Jericho remembered Jesus, the man who battled the devil in the wilderness. He had heard the stories of Jesus' healings and exorcisms. They knew of the lessons he had taught to the thousands gathered on the mountainside near the Sea of Galilee. The man who miraculously fed thousands had arrived in Jericho. Zacchaeus was determined to see who Jesus was. His soul ached to see the power of God. So as Jesus neared his home, he went out. Zacchaeus acted. Although his heart longed to see Jesus and his soul desired to draw near to God, Zacchaeus encountered a crowd, a mass of people as he neared. Other people, when seeing the crowd, feebly lifted up on their toes in vain to see Jesus. Zacchaeus was not like them. He would solve the problem. The spiritual life is full of obstacles, preventing many from seeing God. How many thousands upon thousands of people in each generation across the millennia have said it's too much trouble to go to church, or why should I bother praying because God won't help me? Instead of pressing on and overcoming the problems as Zacchaeus did, they gave up. But thankfully, in each generation, even here in Rye, there are Zacchaeus-like people. In this place, those people said, we need to build a church for us to worship God because he has blessed us. The forebearers of this church pooled their resources to give us this magnificent building. They faced problems and obstacles, but they kept going. They were Zacchaeus-like in their spirituality. They acted, solved problems, and saw Jesus. We are blessed because they did. Zacchaeus found a tall, large tree. He scaled its branches. As he perched on a limb, he saw Jesus. Because of Zacchaeus' action, determination, willingness to overcome challenges he faced, he saw Jesus and Jesus saw him. Jesus rewards those who are persistent in their spiritual life. As Jesus said, God will hear us knocking and will open the door. And what did Zacchaeus do when he met Jesus? Did he, like the rich ruler that Luke described just in the previous chapter, in chapter 18, demand to know what it took to enter the kingdom of God? No. Zacchaeus received Jesus with hospitality. If we are faithful in our spiritual life, we will find God calling us down from the tree, telling us that he is coming to our home. As faithful Episcopalians, we will likely be more like Zacchaeus, one's calling to God. Like the man up in the tree, we need to hear God when he calls us. We must be ready to see Jesus. Zacchaeus was ready. When his neighbors murmured, he stood up for himself. He responded to the divine examination of his holy living. He said that he would give half of his possessions to the poor. What a response! What joy filled Zacchaeus' heart. The law required him to tithe and to give first fruits, to give a tenth of his earnings. But Zacchaeus gave more. Jesus delighted in Zacchaeus' generosity. But that is not all. Zacchaeus defended his holy living. Knowing that his spiritual life was holy, he said he'd repay anyone 4 times the amount if he had defrauded them. He was confident and not worried about the examination. He was also not boastful, not arrogant. He was not proud. But he knew his heart was set on God. He knew the content of his character, and if by chance his actions did not match his claim, he was ready to correct himself. His spiritual life was in order. He was ready to see Jesus. My friends, Zacchaeus gives us a vision of the spiritual life in action. Zacchaeus teaches us to go after God. He urges us to knock on the door, climb the tree, do everything, anything that is needed to see Jesus. Zacchaeus calls us to holy living. The spiritual life he teaches is confident humility and humble determination. As you consider your annual contribution to Christ's church this week, I invite you to examine your spiritual life with Zacchaeus in mind. Can your gift this year be a climbing of the tree to see Jesus moment? When you or your family lay your pledge card on the altar at the end of next Sunday's service, can you be ready to come down the tree and receive Jesus with humble hospitality into your soul? When you do, you will feel the joy that Zacchaeus felt as he gladly welcomed Christ into his home and his soul.